Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to hear from another witness from Kingspan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the panel. Yes, I now call Adrian Pargeter, please.
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pargeter. Would you like to sit down and make yourself comfortable? Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Pargeter, good morning. Can I start by thanking you very much for coming to the inquiry and assisting us with our investigations? We very much appreciate it. If you have any difficulty understanding my questions, or you want me to rephrase the question or ask it in a different way, I'm very happy to do that. We're going to take scheduled breaks, as we do with all witnesses, throughout the course of the day. But if you feel you need a break at any other time, just let us know and we can take a break. I should just ask you also to keep your voice up when answering your questions so that the person who sits to your right, who is the transcriber, can get that down accurately and clearly. And also just a tip, if you can refrain from nodding or shaking your head, but say yes or no, as the case may be, then that goes onto the transcript, whereas a head movement doesn't.
Understood.
Now, you've provided 4 witness statements, I think, to the inquiry to date. Can I take them to you? They'll be in a folder on your desk in front of you there, but they'll also appear on the screen. And I'm going to be going to the screen version with you, but by all means do consult the paper version if you feel more comfortable with that. The first statement is the 1st of October 2018 at KIN 50494. Is that your first witness statement to the inquiry?
Yes, it is.
Can you please go to page 35? There's a signature there. Is that your signature?
That's my signature, yes.
Now let's go to the second statement. That's dated the 18th of October 2019, just a year or so later. KIN 3020824, please. Is that your second witness statement?
It is.
And can you please go to page 116? There's a signature there. Is that your signature?
Yes.
And let's look at your third witness statement dated the 18th of September 2020, KIN 3022610. Is that your third witness statement?
It is.
And can we go to page 68, please? There's a signature above the date of the 18th of September 2020. Is that your signature?
Yes.
Thank you. And finally, your fourth witness statement of the 3rd of November 2020, at KIN 3024385, please. Is that your fourth witness statement to the inquiry?
Yes.
Thank you. And could you please go to page 17? You'll see a signature there. Is that your signature?
It is.
Have you read these witness statements recently?
I have.
And do you say that the contents of these statements are true?
I do.
And have you discussed any of your statements or the evidence that you're going to give today with anybody before coming here today?
Only with my legal team.
Right. Now, before we begin, I just want to ask you a general question about Kingspan, in a sense, the name. In the first 2 statements that we've just looked at, you refer to your employer as Kingspan, and that's how you define it. But in the third statement, you refer to your employer as Kingspan, as Insulation UK. And in the fourth statement, you refer to your employer as Kingspan Insulation. Are they all the same company throughout with different names that you've given them, or do they have different names?
No, my witness statements are based on Kingspan Insulation Limited, which sometimes gets abbreviated to Kingspan, but to differentiate it from the other parts of the group. So I would normally refer to it as Kingspan, but there are other parts of the group which I'm not speaking about, and it's Kingspan Insulation Limited.
Is there any reason why in the first 2 statements you referred to the company as Kingspan, but in the third statement as Insulation UK, and in the fourth statement as Kingspan Insulation? Why not stick to Kingspan throughout?
I think it was just pointed out to me by our legal team to do a fuller explanation, to differentiate it, to make that differentiation.
Right. But so that we're clear, this is the same company throughout?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, in your first witness statement to the inquiry, you set out your education at paragraphs 2.1 to 2.3 on pages 3 and 4. And we can see there, if we just have that up on the screen, a summary of that. And I can take it, I think, quite quickly. It's right, I think, that you completed a higher national diploma in mechanical and production engineering at Birmingham Polytechnic in 1991. Yes?
That's correct.
And then you graduated with a Bachelor of Science, BS Hons first class degree, focusing on design and innovation from the Open University in 2002.
Correct.
Yes. And I think you've explained that that degree could be applied to any type of product design. Is that correct?
Yes, it was a general understanding of the process of designing a product.
Right. And is it right that in 2013 you first obtained a professional diploma in management and then a master's degree in business administration and management from the Open University in 2016?
That's correct.
Right. Now, when you were reading for your professional diploma in management, which you got in 2013, and then in 2016 for your is it right, an MBA?
Yes,
yes.
MBA.
You were employed in senior positions by Kingspan.
I was, yes.
Did you take time off to study, or did you fit your studies in around your...
I fitted my studies in around my role.
Right. And how did you balance the time that you were devoting to your studies in those years and the time given to your job at Kingspan?
With a lot of dedication in my own private time.
Right. But you don't think that the work you were doing, the studies that you were doing, distracted you in any way?
No, I think on some modules it helped. In fact, I switched a module around to do marketing because I was moved into a marketing role.
Right. So just so we're clear, you weren't distracted from your work at work by your work on your academic studies?
I tried not to be.
All right. Now, you've set out in your second witness statement the fact that you sit on or sat on a number of industry committees, and you've set them out.
Yes.
We don't need to look at them unless you want to. But is it fair to say that you are an eminent and a respected voice in the insulation industry in this country?
I wouldn't say that, no. I'm relatively new in a senior position and relatively new on those committees.
Right.
And there are far more, senior, more experienced people within those committees.
Right. What was the purpose of your setting out in a long list your membership of those committees in that statement?
I think because it was part of the question that was asked, so I was trying to give as full an answer as I can.
And it's right that you've published articles, I think, about the use of K15 in reputable construction industry publications, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And there's one example we may need to come to later, Construction Manager, October 2015.
Yes.
And just for the inquiry's reference, that's INQ 3014126. We don't need to go to it, at least at the moment. Can I then ask you about your first role at Kingspan in 2009? You started, I think, in a research and development role.
That's correct.
And now, that was 11 years ago, and without giving too much away, how old were you at the time?
51? No, 41, sorry.
41. Okay, you did give it away.
Yeah.
Now, but that role, was it purely confined to developing another of Kingspan's products, Optim R?
Yes, it was focused on the product called Optimar.
Right. Now, you say it was focused on it, but did you work at all with any other parts of the Kingspan range of products at that time?
No.
So you were just focused on Optim R?
Yes.
Now, Optim R, as I understand it, and tell me if this isn't right, is a PIR insulation product.
No, that's not correct. No, it's a vacuum insulation product.
Right, okay. But it's not for use, I think, above 18 metres, is it?
No.
No. Did you deal with phenolic foam at all during that role?
No.
That you didn't? Now, I think in late 2013, early 2014, as you tell us in your first statement, you were promoted to the role of product development manager.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, and the reason I picked those months, and maybe you paused, was because you said just over 4 years after December 2009. And I just wondered exactly when it was that you were promoted to product development manager.
Yes, I think it was the dates you just mentioned.
Right, late. So let's go with late 2013, early 2014. Can I just ask you whether the role to which you were promoted existed before you were promoted to it?
No, I don't think it did.
Do you know why it was created?
I think because there was a product development system in place called PPDS, Product and Process Development System. And my boss at the time, Malcolm Rochford, felt that that system needed updating, and he'd asked me if I would look at designing a new system, a more modern system. It was working on old technology, old software, and if I would like to take the offer of a product development manager to develop that new process. Project development manager.
I see. So this was not about specific products, but
No,
about designing a
process.
system. And you say a product and process development system. What was wrong with the system that you thought Mr. Rochfort wanted to improve when he promoted you to that role?
I think, one, it was working off old software, and it was always difficult to get the right people around the table at the right time. I think people thought that it was too full of projects as well. There were too many projects on it, and it made the process very slow. So we wanted to have a more streamlined system working on more modern software.
Right. Were there any specific products that were particular candidates for improvement in the sense of the application of this system to them?
I think what we did do was a review of the products that were on the old system to see what we would move forward onto the new. And one of them is the K15 low lambda development, as an example. That did move forward onto it amongst others.
I see. So when you came into this role at that time, is this right, you revised or improved the old system for process and development in relation to K15 among other products?
Among other products.
And what did you do by way of improvements to the old PPDS system you took over?
Well, I mean, Tony Millichap and I were both looking at this together to begin with, and we were looking at what I introduced was what we now call IDS, Innovation Development System, where we had clear stage gates for product development, and then within the stage gates are key decisions, key milestones, to allow a project to be assessed at each stage and then to be taken forward if it successfully completes each stage, or to be dropped if it doesn't. So it was that, and it was also looking for a software platform that we could run this on so people could access it. We can see where each project is. We can get better reporting from it. That was the goal.
Did you do that?
Yes, we did, and that's where Innovation Development System came from.
Right, I see. And when you built the IDS system, did you specifically look at K15 and its development history?
Not its history, no. We took it on the project, I think I started to look at that in around September.
Of 2014. Right.
By then, it had already been worked on as a sort of chemical development to improve the thermal performance of the product. And it had an 8414 test done, and it had some small-scale tests done. We'd done some trials on the line, and I think the idea there was, well, we've gone through some of the stages already at this juncture, but we're at the stage now where we'd like to move it forward into production if we can.
And you're talking about K15, are you?
I'm talking about a low lambda K15.
I understand. We'll come to low lambda later on.
Oh, no.
In terms of, in relation to K15 being sold into the market at that time, what did your work on the PPDS, converting it into the IDS that you've described, what did your work on K15 require you to look at?
I didn't look at the current product.
You didn't look at the current product?
No.
So you're saying that the IDS, as you were developing it, was only in relation to a future or test or trial product, a variant of K15 being sold?
Yes, that's correct.
I see. So does that tell us that when you looked at the PPDS as it came to you, you didn't go back over K15 and its history and look at the documents which...
No.
You didn't. Right. Now, you say in your statement, your first statement at paragraph 2.6, and perhaps we should look at it, it's at page 4, that in this role as product development manager, you say, my responsibilities included ensuring that a robust development process was in place to allow cross-functional teams to ensure all relevant legislation and regulatory requirements were fully taken into account during product development. Does the legislation and regulatory requirements, does that include legislation and requirements relating to fire safety or fire performance?
It would be any regulation that's related to the particular application or product that was being developed. So it would include that for certain projects, yes.
Now, you say that, as you do, that testing and certification was also part of your role. Did that include large-scale fire testing?
It wasn't part of my role. It was part of the role of designing a system which accounted for that.
I see.
So that the system works on a matrix basis, really. You have a project manager who will design the program, but then you'll have the relevant departmental experts who would feed into that program, and that would include anybody in design, production, testing, certification, marketing, etc.
Now, you say in paragraph 2.6 there that your role was to ensure that a robust development process was in place to ensure that all relevant legislation and regulatory requirements were fully taken into account during product development. Do you mean there that the process was to ensure compliance, or merely that compliance was thought about?
It was to ensure the right people who knew about the compliance were involved in the project.
What about making sure that the right people actually did their work properly and ensured that the product did comply? Was that not also part of your role?
No, that's part of whoever's responsibility it is to deliver that element of it. That's their responsibility.
Right, but those teams would report to you, would they not?
They would report into the IDS team. So there was a monthly IDS review meeting, and that they would then report their findings into that team.
Was your role in this first role to oversee the activities of those teams and to make sure that they were doing their job?
It was to make sure they were on plan.
On plan?
To the target, yes.
But what about making sure that they were doing their job and making sure that the products they were developing were compliant with regulatory requirements?
That would be their job, to make sure that they were doing their job.
Would it not also be your job to make sure that they were doing their job, so to speak?
I trusted, I don't know all the ins and outs of every part of every product, and no project manager will. So you've got to trust the people that are doing the allocated parts in their areas to do their role.
Right. Now, you say that the aim was to ensure that a robust development process was in place. Was there a view within Kingspan at that point that the process, as it stood at that time, was not robust?
No, I don't think so. That was just how I wanted to make this new one robust. It didn't mean the other one wasn't.
Right. And the robust development process you're referring to, is that the IDS system that you've described?
Yes.
And how was the information on that system stored within the Kingspan information technology platforms?
So we've got a platform for IDS which is called PlanView. It's the software provider. And on there you can store the timing plans, you can store the updates, the minutes for the gate reviews, and then we can also do reporting from that on certain milestones.
Right. Would communications with testing houses such as the BRE or BRE reports or class reports be filed onto that platform?
They wouldn't be onto that platform, or they would be onto the project file that went with it.
And could anybody in those teams and you access that whenever you wanted?
Not everybody could access everything.
Could you access it?
I could access certain parts, not all of it.
Which parts could you not access?
Well, I probably wouldn't have direct access into the individual project files that were kept. But the timing plan elements, we could look at that from the software.
Why wouldn't you have access into the individual project files?
Because I wouldn't have needed to look into it individually.
No, but I can understand why you might not have wanted to or even needed to. But were you actually denied access?
No, I don't think I was denied.
Right. So if you wanted,
probably just didn't use it.
I follow. Now, as a product development manager, who did you report to? I think you said your boss initially was Malcolm Rochford.
That's correct.
I say, did he remain your line manager for the period you occupied that role, which wasn't very long?
It wasn't very long, so I think he retired in December of 2014. and then by then I was in the marketing role, so I was reporting to Richard Burnley. So there's a big crossover.
So just to be clear, from the time you were appointed into this role in December or so 2013 until the time you were appointed into the marketing role, I think in November 2014, you were reporting to Dr. Rochford.
Yes, correct.
And after that, November 14 onwards, you were reporting to Richard Burnley.
Correct.
And he was the managing director at that stage, was he
Yes,
not?
he was.
Yes, I see. Now, as product development manager, you, I think, were in charge of the a new version of Kingspan K15, which was the low lambda version. Is that right?
No, I wasn't in charge of it. That project had already started, like I mentioned before, and it had gone through some of what we would now call the stage gates. They weren't called that in the PPDS system, but they would be in the new system. And I was then asked to look at developing the program to take it further, and used it as one of the pilot products that were alongside the other ones to use the system on.
Were you involved in any fire testing of that product?
No.
Was there anyone at Kingspan who was more closely involved in the development of this low lambda product of K15 than you?
Yes, Dr. Rochford on the chemistry side of it. On the fire testing side of it would have been Ivor Meredith, and on the processing side, actually trying to process this new material, would have been Gwyn Davis.
Gwyn Davis.
Yeah.
Yes. And they reported, well, Ivor Meredith and Gwyn Davis would have reported ultimately to you on that project, would they not?
They'd have reported in to that on
What's that?
at the IDS gate review meeting on those
Right.
developments.
But it comes to the same thing, I think, that in the end, although they were reported in, I'm not quite sure I understand the difference, in the end, who was their line manager in respect of that development process on that product?
I'm not sure who their direct line managers would have been, but they would definitely been reporting in to me on what was happening on that project.
All right. Who else did you work with on the development of phenolic foam, generally, at that time?
So it may have been Lindsay Hobbs was another one of the processing people. Tony Millichat would have been involved at the at my early stages of that.
Now, you were promoted to head of marketing in November 2014, as you say in your statement.
Yes.
Was that promotion by Richard Burnley? Did he
Yes,
promote you?
he did.
Was there a competition for that post?
There was one other person, I think, who had expressed an interest in the role.
Who was that?
Peter Morgan.
Right. Were you both interviewed?
I believe so.
Right. When you say expressed an interest, and was there actually a competition and a choice was made by Mr. Burnley of the two of you?
I think he definitely spoke to both of us.
Right. Now, was it at this time, so this is November 2014, that Kingspan decided that the low lambda version of K15 was not viable?
There was definitely a point in the programme where, from the processing side, the programme was stopped because we couldn't process it to get the objective of a consistent lower lambda performance from the system.
Do you remember when you took over the job of head of marketing in November 2014, what stage the low lambda project had reached?
No, I think it was still ongoing.
When did it actually finally stop? Do you
I
remember?
can't recall exactly when it stopped.
Right. And let's look at paragraph 2.7 of your statement, your first statement, please, at the bottom of page 4, which I think is on the page in front of us. You say, in November 2014, I was promoted to head of marketing at Kingspan. In this role, I was responsible for the day-to-day management of the marketing team, whose function was the creation and delivery of marketing plans and campaigns. This included the design and production of all marketing materials, such as product brochures and newsletters. The team was also responsible for the development of technical research, and if we go over the page, projects and Kingspan's fire safety compliance campaign regarding the use of K15 in rain screen specifications. What knowledge did you have of K15 and its fire performance at the time you took on the role of head of marketing at that time?
Very, very little. It was part of the learning curve I had of all of the products that we produce. We produce many different products and processes.
Do you say it was part of the learning curve? Did you have a handover at that stage?
No, there was nobody currently in that role.
No.
I think the previous
an induction then.
A previous incumbent had left 12 months maybe before.
Right.
But there was the marketing director, John Garbett,
Right.
who I was sort of dotted line, if you like, into and was there to help me, get onto that learning curve.
So just help me with this. You were head of marketing, but John Garbett remained in post, did he?
Yeah, John Garbett was divisional director of marketing. So he'd previously been the lead marketing person in Kingspan Insulation. He'd then taken a divisional job at some point, I don't know exactly when. There was a marketing manager appointed when he moved up. That marketing manager left. I think it was then a long gap before they'd recruited a replacement, which was me.
Right. I thought you told us earlier that your line manager, when you were appointed to this role in November 2014, was Richard Burnley.
That's why I say dotted into John Garbett.
So does that mean that there was also, when you say dotted line, do you mean a vaguer reporting line to John Garbett?
Yes.
I see. And he was, you called him director of marketing, I think, a minute ago, but is that right? Was he director of marketing?
Yes, I believe so.
But you were head of marketing.
I was head of marketing.
How do those two roles relate to each other?
Because in the structure of the business, so the insulation UK business has got businesses across the world. And so I was part of the GB part of that business.
I see.
But then there was a structure above the management of those where divisional directors sat, which oversaw all of the key functions across the globe.
Now, you say at the top of this page 5 in your statement, that you were responsible for Kingspan's fire safety compliance campaign regarding the use of K15 in rain screen specifications. What was the nature of the safety compliance campaign?
That was the Routes to Compliance campaign I mentioned there, I think. And that was when I took over at the time. There was a lot of, I think, within the business, a view that customers weren't understanding the processes of compliance, the various routes. The technical teams were getting lots of queries, the sales teams were getting lots of queries. So there was a desire to put something together which would help people understand, I think, with that BCA guidance note which had come out earlier, exactly what that meant and what were the 4 routes to compliance, and that's what we set out to try and educate people on.
You say 4 routes to compliance. Do you mean 3?
Well, this one gets mixed up as 2 sometimes. So I think there's 4, but with the desktop studies is a 4th.
Yeah, right.
Option.
But we can perhaps look at this a little bit more closely later on. When you were appointed to this role, and you say you took over or you started Kingspan's fire safety compliance campaign, that was in relation to K15 in particular. What did you look at by reference to previous tests, underlying documents, email runs, test reports, classification reports for K15 when developing the fire safety compliance campaign you refer to?
I think that the programme had started, and one of the key marketeers had started to talk to the technical team to understand what the regulations were. And it was very much driven by what the technical team understood at the time for what the regulations were and what the BCA guidance meant. And so we were looking at that from the information provided by the technical team.
And what did the technical team tell you about K15 and its test history?
So I understood there was an older test from 2005. There was another test which was done in, I think, 2014. And there was a programme ongoing to continue with the testing plan.
You say you understood there was an older test from 2005. Let's just look at that a bit more closely. When did you understand or learn that there was a 2005 test?
I don't know exactly when, but it would have been while we were developing that routes to compliance document.
Okay. Did you start developing the routes to compliance document on your appointment in November?
I think it had already started there. I took it.
You took it over,
yeah.
Right? Who started it?
I think there was a marketeer, Reshma Radurnam, had started to work with Ivor and Tony, I think, to start it off.
Okay. So coming back to your evidence a minute ago that you understood that there was an older test from 2005. Did you discuss that test with anybody or see the data from that test or the test report, the BRE test report?
Not at that time.
Not at that time. Why is that?
So I didn't think I needed to. I was relying on the information being provided by the teams.
Right. Did you discuss the 2005 report with anybody?
Not at that time.
Was it not important for you really to understand the 2005 report, given that it was, well, let me just ask you, did you look and see how K15 was being marketed when you took over this role?
Yes, I did, yes, part of that.
And what marketing documents did you look at?
So there was the document in place at the time, I think was the 2011
the data sheet
version of the literature.
Yes. We don't need to look at it, but
no.
you recall that referred specifically to a BS 8414 Part 1 test in 2005.
Yes, I understand it.
Yeah. So when you took over the role, you would have known straight away that there was a BS 8414 Part 1 test for 2005 for Kingspan K15.
That's correct, yes.
Did you ask anybody a little bit more about that, or
no?
Why is that?
It was already in place. I was looking to move forward, and I wasn't looking back at all.
Given that you were embarked upon a fire safety compliance campaign, as you describe it, and looking to understand the BCA's technical guidance, NATE 18, from June 2014, as you've just explained, I'd just like to understand a bit more about why you didn't involve yourself a little bit more about understanding precisely how the test had taken place and what it had involved.
Because I didn't think I needed to. The information was there, the experts were there, the technical team.
Right. And what about the July 2014 test you've referred to? You said there was a 2014 test for K15. Yes. Similarly, did you look at the detail of that? What was tested, the test reports for that?
No, I didn't, not in the marketing role.
Right. Who did you work with predominantly on this fire safety compliance campaign after your involvement started in November 2000?
So it would have been Reshma from the marketing team.
Right.
And then it would have been Ivor and Tony primarily from the technical team.
Right. Now, we'll come back to some of this material later on, I think, but just moving on in your career, you were then, I think, appointed to a new role as head of technical and marketing Great Britain in May 2015, weren't you?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you were appointed, did your marketing responsibility continue as it had?
It did.
So can we take it from that in addition, the technical role was a super addition to that role?
It was.
What was the technical aspect added to your role as head of marketing because Tony Millichap, who had been head of technical, left Kingspan in May 2015?
That's correct.
I see. In your role, your new role, is it right that you thereafter held overall responsibility for the entire technical side of the business?
Not the whole technical side, because there's two elements to technical. There's technical applications, which is what Tony was in charge of, and then there's technical processing. So previously, when Malcolm Rochford was technical director, he oversaw both sides of that, and Tony would have reported in from the application side of it. And when Malcolm left, that role got split out into different people. So I think Gwyn Davies took on the processing side of that, and Tony Scott eventually, when he was recruited, took on the sort of R&D element of it, and then the application side sat with Tony and then subsequently over to me.
I see. So those individuals you've referred to, Gwyn Davis and Mr. Scott, they reported directly to you?
No, they're senior directors. They were divisional directors.
Oh, I see.
Which was the same level that Malcolm.
I see.
Malcolm.
I see. So I see. But did you then report to them?
No, I reported to Richard Burnley.
I see. Okay. But they were senior to you, but they were involved in something, but you didn't report to them, and they didn't report to you.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm slightly puzzled by that. But does that mean that they were? Well, what sort of relationship in terms of the corporate structure did you have with, for example, Gwyn Davis?
Well, an open relationship.
No, I mean I don't mean personally.
Yeah.
I mean
I meant professionally, but
in responsibility terms.
So it's probably better if I try and explain the structure. So we've got that divisional team where Malcolm Rochford covered 2 roles in that divisional team, which was, well, 3 really. It was R&D, processing and applications. And then when he left, that got split up. So processing and R&D got split up, and there wasn't a divisional director then responsible for applications.
Right.
So applications just sat down then with the head of technical role.
When you refer to applications, I just want to be clear what you mean.
So applications would be understanding how a product would go into a roof, a floor, or a wall.
Oh, I see.
Those type of applications.
Right, where you would put it?
Yes.
I follow. So you would actually have somebody responsible for deciding where a product would go on a building, or
Yes.
its appropriateness for that place.
Correct.
Right. And who was in charge of applications when you occupied your role from May 2015 of Head of Technical and Marketing?
So that would be my role.
That would be your role?
Yes.
Right. Now, how often did you meet with the technical team from May 2015?
So I try and sit down with the technical team on a monthly basis, but I saw them more regularly than that. Open door policy and.
Right. And you say open door. Was your office an open plan office where you sat and could easily...
Yes, after Tony left, I moved into his office. I was on a different floor when I was in the marketing team, but when Tony left, I went into his office.
I see. And these meetings with the technical team, were they face-to-face or were they remote?
No, generally face-to-face.
Right. And when you met the technical team, did you brief yourself first? Did you look at documents, plans, reports before meeting the technical team?
Generally what I would do is I'd get them to just update me on the key areas they were working on, and then I'd use that as an agenda moving forward for the next meeting. So,
when you became head of technical, what processes were in place, if any, to ensure that the accurate technical advice was being provided by technical advisors working on the front line, if I can put it that way, dealing with customers?
So there's different levels of advisor. You've got your frontline advisor, if you like. So that would be the entry level role. So they would get, before they were allowed to answer calls on their own, so to speak, they'd go through a period of training with the more senior members of that team and the manager running the team. And then once they'd got to a certain level, they were then slowly fed into answering calls on their own, and generally that would be monitored by somebody else listening in for the first period of time until they'd got confidence, they thought they knew what they were doing, and then they would be on their own. That process can take quite a long time, longer now than first, because of the just sheer number of products that we now manufacture. But that's the process.
I'm so sorry. Who would do the monitoring that you just referred to?
So that would be the senior team leaders or the manager.
Right. Did you make any changes to the way in which the advice was being given, the structure that you just referred to, when you entered the role in 2000?
Not on the technical frontline advice team, no.
Right. How did you, as head of technical, satisfy yourself that customers were being given accurate advice by Kingspan about the use of Kingspan products?
Just by relying on that process and the management of that process by the line manager.
You let them get on with it?
Yeah.
You didn't spot check that they were doing was right, or
No, I mean,
any other direct way?
my role was very managerial. You know, some of the detailed technical information they'd be providing, they'd be more knowledgeable on it than I would in detail. So my main role was on the sort of managing that team rather than understanding the finite technical detail.
And did that team report back to you regularly?
Via the manager.
And if there were any difficulties being encountered by frontline technical advisors from customers about applications, would that filter up to you?
It could do if it couldn't get resolved.
Do you remember whether there were any particular difficulties after May 2015, indeed after November 2014, when you were appointed a head of marketing, about K15 and its use over 18 metres?
Not in the marketing role. In the technical role, there were definitely queries coming in which I knew we were struggling to answer. The teams were struggling to answer, and that's when I think that they'd set up a separate high-rise inbox so that Ivor and the project team could answer those questions. The more senior people could answer those questions.
When was that?
I think Tony set it up, but so it was in place when I took over. I don't know exactly the date, but
so there was, when you came to the role in May 2015, there was a high-rise inbox already set up for questions.
I believe so. Yeah.
And were they questions specifically about K15?
Yes, that would have been mainly. Yes, it's the only one really we were recommending.
Did you
high-rise.
ask why it was necessary or had been necessary to establish a high-rise inbox for K15?
I asked really what the issues we were getting.
Who did you ask?
Question. So that would have been Ivor. Meredith would have been the main
What did he tell you?
point of contact.
What did he say?
And he would say things like, they don't understand the routes to compliance. They're asking if we've got retrospective applied products on a building, asking for information and test evidence, and he was providing that data.
Right. So let's just be clear, you had a conversation or conversations with Ivor Meredith about customers asking questions about information and test data about K15. Do you remember when those conversations took place?
They wouldn't have been long after I started, because it was something that Ivor was very busy on.
Started in which role?
In the head of technical role.
So that would have been May 15, not before.
No, correct. That's right.
Follow. And do you know how Ivor Meredith was providing data?
As I understood it, they'd got a sort of standard set of responses that they were using, and usually just taking it on a project query by query basis.
You say a standard set of data. What is that? Is that like a template?
Yeah, a standard response, which they would then mould to suit the particular application.
I see. And did you look at that standard response yourself? Is it it's a script? Is it a document which tells you what to say?
Usually I've done an email. Yes, I don't think I looked at it at any great detail at the time.
Did you not familiarise yourself with this document when you came into your role in May 2015?
I don't recall getting into the granularity of that to start with.
Right. Did Ivor Meredith ever discuss whether that standard set of data, as you call it, standard response, was accurate?
Sorry,
did Ivor Meredith ever seek to have a discussion with you about whether that standard response was accurate?
No, he would have. I would have assumed that it was accurate from his discussions with me.
Right. And were you concerned that there was a pattern of customers asking about K15 and its appropriateness for use over 18 metres to such an extent that it was necessary to set up a designated inbox. Did that concern you?
It did concern me, and I wanted to try and understand what was happening.
And how did you go about understanding what was happening?
I went to see a couple of customers at one stage. I think it would have been maybe July, just to go down and speak to them about what their issues were.
Right.
And it was generally around the fact that we've put K15 into the application, and we're now looking for some evidence to say that it was okay to do that, because either the NHBC was questioning it, and it was those types of conversations.
So by July 15 at the very latest, can we take it that this was a significant enough problem for you to leave the office and go and talk to customers about specific projects?
I wanted to understand what Ivor was facing.
I see. And who are these customers? Can you identify them?
Oh, I think one was CISC. We saw two on the same day, and I can't remember what the other one was.
CISC?
CISC, yeah,
SISK.
SISK.
I may be wrong here, but are they contractors?
Yes, they might be, yeah.
And you can't remember the name of the other one?
No, I went down with Mark Swift there was a cool firm sales manager.
Right, and where were these projects?
London.
Do you know where?
Meetings were in London.
Do you know where?
No, I can't remember where.
Right, face-to-face meetings.
Yes.
Do you remember whether they were set up by email or whether there was a response, a thank you, a debrief afterwards by email?
I can't recall.
Okay. Now, when Tony Millichap left, was there a handover process?
There was, I think, a month of time allocated to handover. Yeah.
Right. And did he actually give you a file and hand it to you and say, this is what you need to look at to take on your role, let's go through it together? Did anything like that happen?
No, we were in different offices at the time, both very busy, so we didn't sit down all that often, but we just sat down, and I was trying to understand particularly the front line team. I had no experience of the front line team, so we were just generally caught up.
You generally caught up. Did he express any particular concerns or raise any particular problems with you?
About products?
Yes, about products.
No.
About anything else?
I think he got concerns over Ivor and how Ivor was performing, so he sort of just told me to watch out for that, and one of the reasons why I wanted to go and see what he was dealing with.
Right.
And he was concerned with the workload that was coming through.
Right. You say you wanted to go and see what he was dealing with. I'm just interested in this visit to CISC, because I am told, have not seen any documents about that at all. Can you remember, doing the best you can, whether there were any email communications with CISC or about CISC internally?
No, I can't recall.
But you wouldn't have set up a meeting and done it all by telephone, I imagine.
Ivor had set the meeting up, so it was Ivor and Mark Swift had set the meeting up.
Mark Swift.
Yes.
Right. Did Tony Millichap give you any information about the history of fire testing on K15 during the handover?
Not that I can recall.
What about any past problems, concerns with the NHBC or on NHBC's part? Did he discuss that with you?
No, but I was sort of got a vague awareness of the issue, that the sort of recent issue with the NHBC. I was copied into a couple of the very early emails around that. So that was when I was in the marketing role, I think it might have been. And so I understood a little bit about that, but not into the detail which involved afterwards.
And we may come to that later in due course. But did Mr. Millichap mention any complaints or problems coming from customers, such as Wintec or Lakesmere? Two names.
No, I wasn't aware of Wintec or Lakesmere's complaints.
Right. Now, moving forward in your career, coming back to that, you were then appointed in May 2019, I think, weren't you, to the post of Director of Technical, Marketing and Regulatory Affairs for Kingspan, Great Britain. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Was that a main board position?
No, that's still within the GB UK
Right.
team, if you like, GB team.
So you're not on the main board?
No, not on the main board.
Was there a competition for that role? Do you remember?
No, I don't believe there was.
Do you know who made the decision to appoint you, in addition to your roles as head of or director of technical and marketing, a director of regulatory affairs for Kingspan?
Ralph Mannion, who's the current MD.
I'm sorry.
Ralph Mannion.
Ralph Mannion.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Now, do you know? So he made that decision. Did you have a discussion with him, an interview with him, or did you just get told by him?
Oh, no, we had a discussion.
What was was that a pre-existing post?
No, it's a new role.
Did he tell you why it was being created?
I think just in recognition of efforts to date.
I see, recognition of your efforts today.
Yes.
So I see. So being appointed to head of regulatory affairs was, as it were, a reward for your efforts.
Well, I'd already undertaken that work.
Right.
So I was managing two people by then who were looking at regulatory and public affairs.
Can you just tell us what efforts you were being rewarded for, or recognised, your word, for in the arena of regulation?
So I'd taken one of the, it was a SAP advisor, a very experienced technical person, and I wanted to start to make sure that we got Brexit coming along. We knew Brexit was coming along, and I wanted to have somebody in post who could understand the regulations around the products as a whole, and not just any one particular product, and also some of the more technical details around things like internal wall insulation, external wall insulation. There's a lot of other things we need to consider other than fire within those types of applications. So, and he was in that, so I brought him on in that, and he was representing us at the CPA technical meetings, for example, and on other areas. And then we'd taken on somebody to look at the sort of public affairs and look at the wider scope of the industry.
Who was this person, this SPA advisor?
The sub-advisor was Jonathan Ducker.
Right. Okay. Well, we may come back to that in due course. But this is May 2019, isn't it?
Correct.
So this is after, is this right, after the Hackett review?
Yes.
The consultation in relation to that?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, did you do work in relation to Kingspan's consultation response to the Hackett review?
Yes, it was a team approach.
Right, okay. Well, we'll come back to that, I think, perhaps later. Can we go to your second statement, please? I'd like to go to page 30 within it. And you say on page 30 at paragraph 4.42, as a result of the Grenfell inquiry and my subsequent investigations, I became concerned that two of the BS 8414 tests referenced in Kingspan's marketing literature for K15 may have used non-standard K15 in the test. These were the 2005 test, where it appears the product was made from old technology, and the first 2014 terracotta test, which may have been produced for a development project for improved lambda performance. When did your investigations into those problems or issues begin?
I think we started to look at that probably just around the time we became core participants to the inquiry. And so that started the investigation into everything that was surrounding K15 and all of its historical testing and marketing, which is what fed into obviously the witness statements and our evidence to date.
Right. Can you be a bit more precise about dates?
No, I can't recall exactly when.
What was the reason for starting those investigations you refer to?
I think to provide evidence to the inquiry.
Right. So is it that but for the inquiry, you wouldn't have started the investigations?
I think to the degree which we have done, that no, we probably wouldn't.
Right. Now, we're going to go into this in some detail in due course, Mr. Pargeter, but is it your evidence that before undertaking these investigations in order to assist the inquiry, you yourself were not aware of any inconsistencies with fire testing or questions about whether the results of fire testing were genuinely representative of the K15 product then being sold?
On the 2005 test, I did become aware in, I think, 2016, some point in 2016, that the description of the cladding panel seemed to be incorrect, and also that it was confirmed to me that it was done on old technology. So that we understood prior to then.
Indeed, and that's why I'm asking you the question, really. You see, at paragraph 4.42, you say that it was as a result of the Grenfell inquiry and your subsequent investigations that you became concerned, as you say, that the BS8414 tests referenced in Kingspan's marketing literature for K15 may have used non-standard K15 in the test. You don't say there that you'd known that fact, at least as a basic fact, in 2016, do you?
I do say that elsewhere.
You do say that elsewhere.
In my
Come
witness
to it,
statements.
my question is why you don't say it there.
Probably because I know I explained about it later on or in a different part of the witness statement.
Well, can you just help me? Is that first sentence correct or is it incorrect?
I think maybe the word concerned is the key word there. When I became aware of it in 2016, I wasn't concerned about it. I understood what it was. I thought I understood what it was, and I wasn't concerned by it. Well,
you see, we'll look at this in a moment, but it's not until your third statement in September 2020, so some weeks ago only, that you actually refer to becoming aware of this discrepancy in 2016. And what I'd really like to know is why that fact doesn't appear in either of your first two statements, and indeed at paragraph 4.42 it appears to be contradicted. Can you explain that?
No, I think this was just my response to that particular question. I've no attempt to hide that I was aware of it earlier than then.
Well, it's an odd sentence, I have to suggest to you, because it does suggest that although you use the word concerned, it does suggest that in fact you didn't know about the discrepancy that you refer to there until you started looking as a result of the Grenfell Tower Inquiry investigations.
Well, wasn't my intention to give
right,
that
but you say
inference.
I see. So when we read paragraph 4.42, we should say you knew about it, but only became concerned after the inquiry had begun and your investigations as a result.
Yes,
I see.
I'd be happy with that.
Now, let's look a little bit more closely together, if we can, at the 2005 BS8414 test. And just to put a figure in your mind, this is test number 220876. It's a number that comes up a lot in documents, and I just want to fix it in your mind and indeed mine. And just to give you the factual summary of it, it's right, isn't it, I think, that on the 31st of May 2005, Kingspan undertook a BS8414 Part 1 test, so masonry, on a system at the BRE using K15 and a cement particle board.
Correct, that's
yes.
what the report says, yeah.
And as I say, we have the report is 220876, and the test report itself is dated the 8th of December 2005, and I'll just read the reference into the record. It's BRE 402511. And there's a classification report in September 2015. It's KIN 50134, if people want to look at that as we go. Now, I just want to ask you first about the K15 used in the 2005 test. And I apologise in advance. We're going to be jumping around between your witness statements as we do this process, so bear with me. Can we look first at your first statement, please, at KIN 50496, and go to page 12. And we look at paragraph 4.13a. Now, you say there, as at the supply date, this is May or June 2015, that's the date of supply of K15 to the Grenfell Tower site. You say Kingspan had commissioned BS8414 test and classification reports for the following BS8414 tests of systems incorporating K15. A, BS8414 Part 1, 2002, test on a phenolic insulated rain screen system, test report number 220876, dated 8th December 2005. The system tested included K15 with a UAC manufactured cement particle board, rain screen, fixed to an aluminium railing system. The tested system satisfied the BR135 classification criteria. However, it appears that a formal report to certify this was not commissioned until 2015. Now, you say nothing more in this statement, your first statement, October 2018, about that test, and nothing about any inconsistencies or irregularities with it, do you?
No, I was just purely stating there what was in the evidence at the supply date would have been on the report.
Right. Now, this is, of course, late 2018, but at this stage, of course, you knew, because you told us that you'd known that since 2016, that there was at least a question mark about whether the K15 tested was the K15 now being sold.
Yes.
Had been sold after 2006.
Correct.
So my question is, why didn't you refer to that in paragraph 413 there?
I think we were doing our investigations and we needed to be sure that although there was, we thought it could have been old tech and new tech, we needed to be sure exactly what it was.
Right. Well, why not just say, we have this concern, we're still investigating, we'll come back to you?
I think I was just putting what was in evidence at the time for people to see at the time of the supply,
right,
not what was known later.
Right. Well, let's track it through. We then go to the same test that you refer to it in as you refer to it in your second statement. Let's look at that. And that's October 2019, 18th of October 2019, page 94, please. At paragraph 10.30 there, under the heading 2005 BS8414 test, you say, as I've explained above, I was not involved in the 2005 BS8414 test, but during my time as head of technical, I became aware that the K15 being produced at this time may have been manufactured from a process referred to as old technology, quotes. I was not aware as to when the product manufactured and sold on the market changed from old technology to the current product, or whether there was any significant difference between the two processes or in the performance, fire, or otherwise of the resulting products. However, as a result of information which has come to light as a result of this inquiry, I understand that new technology may have been employed in the production of K15 at Pembridge from September 2006. And then you go on to say, at page 95, if we can just turn the page, at paragraph 1033 there, at the last sentence, you say, given the change in technology, however, Kingspan has removed the 2005 BS8414 test report from its website. Do you know when the 2005 test report was removed from Kingspan's website?
I think it was March 2019.
March?
Yes.
So some 6 months before this witness statement, which is October.
Yes,
2019.
I think so.
Right. And the reason you give is the change in technology from old to new. When the decision was made, was there... Well, who made the decision? That's the first question.
The decision about...
To withdraw the test from the website.
I think it was a group decision from the team involved in the inquiry that with what we understood then about that test, it was prudent to withdraw it from the website.
Right. Now, who was in that team?
Well, Gwyn Davies is part of that team, our lawyers, group counsel, part of that team, John Garbett is part of that team.
Right. And who, in the corporate sense, made the decision to remove the test report from the website? Who actually made the ultimate decision within Kingspan to take it down?
I would say that probably from a corporate sense would be Look and Dowd, our group.
Right. Is there a report about the recommendations and the findings which led to that decision?
I think there are some notes on that from which the lawyers have got.
Well, are there any notes within the company that lead to the decision?
Not that I can specifically
Right. I just
refer
want to
to.
be clear about this. Are you telling us that the decision-making process was all done as a result of legal advice or as part of legal advice being given? It's important I know that.
I think they were certainly involved in a lot of the work, obviously post or our involvement within the inquiry.
Right. Whilst I don't want to know about the legal advice, because I know it's not right, you should tell me, and you indeed can't, so be careful what you say here. But what I want to know is whether there are any documents which show the decision being made as a result of the legal advice being given.
I'm not 100% sure.
Right. But it's right to think that the change in technology from old to new was something that had been known to Kingspan in the 11 years that the 2005 test report had been used by Kingspan up to that date.
That's correct.
Was that not a concern to you at the time? March 2019.
Not really, in that,
Really?
because from what I understood, and still do understand, that the difference between the technologies is relatively small. It's not a big change in the chemistry. It was more of a change in the processing of the product to ensure we could make it more effectively and efficiently. And that's how I understood, and still do to quite a large extent, the degree of the difference between old and new tech.
Well, we'll come to explore that in due course, but it was sufficiently important, wasn't it, for a decision to be made at the highest level to remove this long-standing test report from Kingspan's website?
Yes, I think it was out of an abundance of caution on it. I think, would we classify it as a small change or a large change? And I think, on balance, the team felt that it would be a fairly significant change. So in the process, not so much in the product, but it would then, as a result, felt it was different enough to no longer rely on it.
And now, if we go to your third witness statement, KIN 3022610, at page 52, please. Let's look together at paragraph 7.1, the top of that page. And you're asked the question, there's a bit of a run-up to it, but when specifically did this information come to your knowledge? And that's about the change. And your answer is, I think I first became aware that the 2005 BS8414 test may have used a different version of K15 than sold post-2006. Towards the end of 2016, my detailed understanding of the issue started to develop from the end of 2018 onwards. Now, if you were aware of the fact that the 2005 test had been undertaken with a different version of K15, at any stage in 2016, even without the full details, why is there no mention of that in your first witness statement, which is October 2018?
Because again, it wasn't really fact. We suspected it was. Gwyn Davies suspected it was if it was in 2005. So again, needed to be sure of exactly when the crossover was. But I did know that there was a potential that was in old technology.
So does it follow that at some point in 2016, you say towards the end of that year, you'd been aware that Kingspan was continuing to rely on a large-scale BS8414 test, fire test, that did not represent or might not have represented the product then being sold to the market?
That's correct.
But nonetheless, you allowed that product to continue to be sold as if it were until, well, until 2020, in fact.
Yes, because I was advised by Gwyn Davies that the performance in fire would not have been any different. I didn't have any concerns about its performance in fire, just that it was a processing change and part of the process of development of the K15 product. So I wasn't concerned by it. So that's why I continue to rely on it.
Right. You say you weren't concerned by it. I want to explore that, but other than removing the 2005 test report from Kingspan's own website, did you actually do anything in 2016 or after 2016 until March 19 to have the test report removed from circulation or withdrawn?
No, I didn't.
Did you do anything in 2016 or after that year to investigate how it could be that for 11 years, perhaps 10 years or so, up to that point, K15 was being sold to the market, which was not the same product as had been the subject of the 2005 test?
No, I didn't, because it was, I assumed it was common knowledge within the organisation. It had been there for a long time, and people, had understood the changes a lot better than I during the process. So I didn't take any further steps.
You didn't take any further steps. Once the Grenfell Tower fire had happened, were you not concerned from June 2017 that customers were still buying K15 on the basis of a BS8414 test, which was a test done on a different product?
No, because I didn't expect that there was any difference in the fire performance. It wasn't something that...
You didn't expect there was any difference in the fire performance. Did you actually seek to get to the bottom of that question and have it absolutely and thoroughly answered?
We have, as a team, tried to do that as well, and I'm still not convinced there is a large difference, any difference in fire performance from the 2005 product and the product that we're producing today.
If, as you say, you weren't concerned that there was any difference and you were able to continue selling it without withdrawing it, why withdraw it then in March 2019?
I think because
from the website.
Yeah, exactly. The team view was that even though the belief is that there is no difference in fire, that on reflection we should withdraw it from now on.
Can you help me with this? I think you said earlier, and we've heard this evidence from other people, that Mr. Meredith was the man who was most involved in fire testing of products, including K15.
Correct.
Did you ever ask Mr. Meredith about the relative performance of old technology and new technology in fire?
No, I didn't. Specifically.
Wasn't he the obvious person to ask?
Well, in 2016 he wasn't in the business.
No, so you didn't ever ask him earlier?
I don't recall any discussions specifically about old technology and new technology.
All right, thank you.
Once you discovered in 2016 that what was being sold was not what had been tested, did you take any steps to inform the market by revising your product literature?
No, I didn't.
Why not?
Because I can say I wasn't concerned. I thought the fire performance was the same, and it was extensively the same product. It was just produced in a different method.
And what precisely led you to the view that it was the same fire performance?
Just by discussions with Gwyn Davies, for example, who believed at the time, I think still does as well, that the fire performance was always been a CS in the Euro class, a CS1.
And to the best of your knowledge, what was Gwyn Davies basing his information on?
Just his experience, I think. He would have been around at the time of the technology transfer.
Right. Why did you not seek either to take expert, independent, external advice about whether the fire performance was the same on the product being sold as it had been on the 2005 test, or do a test.
I don't know where we would have gone to have got independent advice on the fire performance of the old technology.
Did you realise from late 2016 that you were continuing to market K15 for use compliant use above 18 metres on the basis of the 2005 test, which by then you knew had been done on a different product?
Yes, I was aware that was still in the literature.
Yes. And that was clearly misleading literature, wasn't it?
I don't think it was misleading, certainly not deliberately. I checked out as far as I could at the time, and I was reassured that the fire performance was the same. So,
well, you say not deliberately, and we'll come to this, but I feel I need to pursue this right now. You say not deliberately, but given that you knew that the products were different and the customers did not, it surely must have occurred to you that when they read the marketing literature relying on the 2005 test, that they would be misled by that.
But different in what sense? They weren't different in the performance that they were looking at in terms of that fire test. They were the same performance in fire. So they weren't different.
So why not tell them candidly that although the 2005 test was done on a different product, you do not believe that the new product would perform any differently, so that the customer buying K15 for use above 18 metres would know precisely what it is they were buying?
That could have been a course of action, but not one that I did take.
No, and I've got to suggest to you that you didn't take it deliberately. You deliberately didn't take that step.
No, I don't think I did deliberately not take that step.
And you decided for yourself that it didn't matter, and let the customers believe that K15 they were buying was based on a test on a product which was actually the same when it wasn't.
I believe they were getting the same performance from the product, from the 2005 product, as they were getting from the 2015 or 16 product.
And that was a belief based on no science, no independent assessment, and no test.
No, just on internal investigations, internal discussions.
Internal discussions.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much. Mr. Pargeter, we have a short break during each session, and we'll take one now. We'll come back please, at 25 to 12. And I have to ask you on this occasion, and indeed on others, when you're out of the room, please don't speak to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it.
Of course.
All right. Thank you very much. Would you like to go to the usher, please? Right, 25 to 12, please. Yes, would you ask Mr. Pargeter to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Pargeter, ready to carry on?
I am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Ready,
Chairman.
Mr. Millett?
Mr. Pargeter, I'd like to go to your recently disclosed notebooks in respect of your reference to CISC. Can we go to KIN 30024414, please? Now, this is part of, or an extract from your notebook, and at the head of the page we can see there's a date of the 15th of July, which was the date of the next management meeting in Glossop. And then underneath that, consultation responses, first few weeks, Ivor, missed meeting with CISC and Bellway. And then there's other material there. And a little bit lower down that page, you can see technical report question, 4-page presentation on next steps, reply to CISC, where is it? Now, my question about that is, first of all, was Bellway the other customer you went to see?
Yes, it was.
It looks as if Mr. Meredith didn't go to either of those meetings. Is that right?
That's correct.
So did you go on your own?
I went with Mark Swift.
You went with Mark Swift. What's the reference to technical report?
So Ivor would produce a monthly technical report, and he hadn't been on time with the one at that particular time. So that's what I was. It's a question for Ivor really. Where's your technical report?
Was that anything to do with CISC?
No.
Or Bellway?
No, no.
No, it wasn't. And what about the 4-page presentation on next steps? Was that about CISC or Bellway?
No.
And then reply to CISC, where is it? Were you expecting to send a written reply to CISC?
Yeah, I was expecting Ivor to send a written reply.
Did you get one from him?
I don't recall.
Did you send one to them?
I suspect we would have done, because the issue was resolved eventually.
Do you recall whether there was a document to which you were going to reply, as this note indicates?
I don't recall.
Right. And what was the upshot of your meetings with CISC and Bellway?
I think whatever their concerns were at the time, they were resolved at some point in the future. I don't think there was any follow-up on those. They were project-specific requests.
Right. Now, let's look at your first witness statement and go, please, to page 14 at paragraph 4.17. You say there, prior to the supply date, Kingspan had access to copies of the following desktop studies for rain screen cladding systems, incorporating K15, which were considered to be compliant with BR 135. And then you set out 6 desktop studies done in and after 2014 using K15, don't you?
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
And we can see over the page what those are. Those are the 5 there, and the 6th is on. Well, the first one is on the page before. Would you agree that the 2005 test is referred to in each of these 6 desktop reports to which you refer?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. Let's look at 2 together. And the first one is the First Street North. That's back on the previous page. It's the first of those to which you refer. 31st July 2014. And you say, this was a report commissioned from Arup by Carillion that assessed a system incorporating K15 with either Euroclad architectural, Alpolic ACM, or CEP Petrarch stone rain screen. And you referred to the report in the footnote there, at footnote 16. Now let's look at the report. It's at KIN 30100974. And this is the first page of that report. And if we go to page 11, we can see that under section 4.1, K15 is to be the insulation. See that?
Yes.
Yes. And you can see that in the third box down. Insulation Kingspan Cool Therm K15. And it says see section 5.3. And then if we move on to page 15, under section 5.1, we can see there is a reference to the BS 8414 Part 1 test from 2005. You can see that in the first part of the text there on the left-hand side, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And then if we move on to page 17 and look at the second item down on that page, we can see insulation. You see it there? 100 millimetres and 80 millimetres thick Kingspan K15 compared to 60 millimetres thick K15 used in test. And the test there is the 8414 test in 2005, wasn't it?
Yes.
And the point being made here is that the only difference between the K15 used in the 2005 test and the K15 to go into the First Street North system was the increased thickness.
Yes.
Yes. Page 18, please. Paragraph 5.3.3. On that page, we can see there, I think it's better to see it in Appendix A on page 27 and 28, but 5.3 itself refers on page 19 to the material, K15. You see that? So properties, under properties of insulation material and material makeup, and underneath that, 5.3.2, the K15 board has been confirmed as a thermoset, and then you've got a long description there about how it would perform in a fire. You see that? And then the 476 tests, parts 7 and 6 on the right-hand side of the page in the box. Just pick that up there. And then if we look at Appendix A, which is referred to under paragraph 5.3.1, we on page 27 and 28, we have Appendix A, schedule of Kingspan responses to K15 fire performance queries, and A1, if we go to page 28, is the information provided by Kingspan. The table below is a duplicate copy of the information requested from Kingspan in regards to obtaining further information on the K15 board performance in fire. As previously mentioned, no specific test data for the 100mm board has been provided. And if you look at the box on the right-hand side of the page, you can see that the tests are referred to, and then if you look at the fifth box down, you could see that there's a reference to the BS 8414 test details and results for 60mm K15. See attached BRE report. You see that?
Yes.
Nothing there to indicate that the K15 was different from the K15 tested in that report, is there?
Not that I'm aware.
Can you account for why neither Arup nor Carillion appear to know that the 2005 test was on a different K15 product?
Because at the time we were still relying on that test for its use with the current product.
Indeed. So do you accept that this desktop is actually worthless because the BS 8414 test was on a different product?
No, I don't think it is worthless because, well, like I've mentioned before, the fire performance of the old technology and the current technology or new technology is similar, and we've demonstrated that by a subsequent test on a very similar system, as similar as we could replicate with the current product, and that also passes.
Do you accept that those people who compiled this test were proceeding on the assumption that the K15 product tested in the 2005 test was the same as that going into the North Street building?
Yes.
Do you accept, and you told us you didn't know about this difference until 2016, but do you accept, knowing what you know now, that that was misleading, and in fact Kingspan knew very well that it was selling Kingspan K15 as a different product from what had been tested in the 2005 test?
I don't think like I said before, it's not a different product. It's essentially the same product. It's still a phenolic foam which has got the same type of thickness foil coating on it. It's just the process that was different. So I think at the time, the belief was that it was representative of the current product in terms of its fire performance, particularly in a system test.
Now, when you made your statement, your first statement in which this desktop appears as one of six examples, this is October 2018 when you made this statement. You knew by then that the K15 being sold was different from the K15 as tested. Why, given that knowledge at the time of that statement, did you identify this desktop but not qualify it by telling the inquiry that Arup and Carillion had proceeded on a misapprehension as to precisely what the product was that was going on to First Street?
It hadn't crossed my mind to do so.
I can't quite understand why it hadn't crossed your mind to do so, given that you had been told 2 years previous that it was a different product.
Like I say, it isn't a different product. It's a different process. So my belief is it's essentially the same product, manufactured in a different process.
I was going to ask you questions about one or two of these others. Do you accept also that, in fact, these desktops also proceed upon a fundamental misassumption as to precisely what K15 was?
The reports don't tell you the difference between the processing of the product now. They just reference its performance in that particular test, system test. That's all.
Right. Now, we've seen...
Sorry, can you just help me? Give me a moment. Were you aware that there had been a change in the nature of the foil facer around about 2006?
No, as far as I'm aware, the foil facer thickness has remained the same from 2005 test, which was I believe a 25 micron.
And they introduced perforations, didn't they, in connection with the
introduction of new technology?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
Did you consider whether the introduction of perforations might affect the performance?
I don't believe the introductions of perforations has any effect on the fire performance of the product in a large-scale system test.
And what was the basis for that understanding?
I believe that now, and I probably would have believed that from when I started to understand exactly how that test performs and what the requirements of that test are.
Right. Thank you.
Those desktop assessments were not withdrawn in 2019, were they?
Not as far as I'm aware, no.
Even though in March 2019, Kingspan had decided to withdraw the test from its website.
That's correct.
So, can you explain why, having made that decision, Kingspan did not write to each of the contractors or architects who had produced these desktop reports in reliance on the BS 8414 Part 1 test from 2005 and tell them that you had withdrawn that test from your website and why?
Yes, because what we wanted to do was to understand exactly what the implication might be of the differences, if any, in the performance of those products. So we undertook a test program, which I mentioned just, to try and replicate it so that when we did go back to the fire engineers with that evidence, we got replication, if you like, test evidence on the current product or the new technology for them to make a judgment on whether any assessments or judgments that made in the past would still hold or whether they felt they were compromised enough to withdraw them.
What was the purpose of withdrawing the test report from your website on the one hand, but leaving these building owners who owned these 6 buildings in the dark about precisely the basis on which it had been safe to apply K15?
I think to remove it from the website was just ensure that any further assessments don't rely on that evidence anymore, and obviously to in order for them to understand, the fire engineers and the building owners to understand the implication of the differences, we needed to provide some, test evidence to support that.
So let me just piece that together a little bit. You withdrew the test report from the website because you knew it was no longer reliable, yes? That's what you just said. I just want to make sure I've understood it correctly.
Just because then people couldn't rely on it going forward.
Exactly. And that's because you thought that it was no longer reliable going forward.
Yes, correct.
Yes? But on the other hand, you didn't tell the owners of the 6 buildings in respect of which desktop studies had been done that the desktop reports that they had relied on safely to put K15 above 18 metres were also no longer reliable.
Well,
Can you explain why you were prepared to withdraw the tests but not tell the building owners?
Yeah, because I think
Exactly why it was.
I think because there's a belief that the reports are still reliable, because of the belief that the product performance isn't that different, if different at all. But that belief needed to have some basis of evidence. So, if we'd have just withdrawn the reports and said, well, we think it's the same, would that have been enough? And these reports and these buildings are already in existence. They're already there. So the next action was to move forward and do some testing to satisfy ourselves that that statement that there is no implication can be stood behind, or if it proved that there was, then it's a different conversation with the fire engineers.
Why not simply write to these building owners and tell them, in the interim, that these reports are not reliable, that you're doing a retesting programme, and that they ought to know that in the interim, and you'll report back to them as soon as you could once you had the results?
I think we could have done, but I don't know what benefit that would have done without any backup evidence.
Well, I suppose, let me put it to you, you don't know, but let me put it to you, that it would have informed the building owners that the basis on which they had applied K15 at the date or after the date of these desktop reports was potentially erroneous, wouldn't it?
But that could have been a false pretension.
Why didn't you trust them to make their own minds up about that?
Because they can't make their minds up without any test evidence. They needed test evidence to know whether that assumption is correct.
When Kingspan removed the 2005 test from its website, did Kingspan, either on the website or elsewhere, offer any reasons for doing so? Or did the test report simply just disappear one day?
We just took them off, just so that they couldn't be referenced any further.
And I'm taking it from the exchange we've just had about the desktops that you didn't thereafter contact any building owners who owned buildings on which you had known that K15 had been applied and tell them that they were working on the basis of a misassumption as to what had been tested in 2005?
No, not until recently.
Not until recently. And when you say recently, you mean the 23rd of October 2020?
Correct.
So when you referred to these 6 desktops in your 2018 statement, you didn't reveal to the inquiry that you had known for some 2 years that the K15 that is referred to in those tests as having passed that test was not the same as the K15 that was used on those buildings. Clearly you didn't do that. Why is that?
Sorry, what was the question? When was this evidence provided in my second witness statement?
Your first witness statement.
Okay.
I'll rephrase the question. Why, when you did your first witness statement and referred to these 6 desktops in October 2018, did you not reveal that you had known for some 2 years by then that the K15 referred to in these desktops was different from the K15 that had been tested?
I think we just wanted to be sure of the facts. Exactly when did the technology change, and what were the implications?
Well, what was it that you didn't know in October 2018 when you did your statement that you knew in March 2019, which led you to withdraw the test reports?
I think personally, I didn't. I've said it before that I wasn't aware there was any difference in fire performance, and so that's why I didn't consider it again.
Was any external organisation, NHBC, BRE, BBA, LEBC, told that K15 as tested in 2005 was different from K15 as applied from 2006?
No, not at the time. What we did do was contact the BBA and ask them to be removed from the certificate, and also LABC. They were removed from their certification as well. I think by April 2019, the LABC certificate was amended, and we started the process with the BRE at around the same time. Sorry, BBA, not BRE. Right. I'm looking at the report.
You see, by this point, 2019, the Grenfell Tower fire was already some 20 months before that. Did it not occur to you, particularly given that what we had seen with the Grenfell Tower fire and the external fire spread, did it not occur to you that leaving out there K15 on buildings, with building owners thinking that it had safely passed a 2005 8414 test, was dangerous?
No, I don't believe it is dangerous. I believe the performances are the same material. So it's more of a technicality over what exactly was tested rather than a difference in performance to give a concern over safety.
Did it not occur to you that it was a matter of the gravest urgency, if you were going to take that view, to verify it with the most robust science possible?
Yes, and that's why we undertook the testing programme that we did.
And to do so as a matter of the extremest urgency?
Yes, and I think we did it in fairly quick time as well.
How can you account for the fact that about 18 months then passed between withdrawing the test from the website in March 2019 and withdrawing the test and the classification report only in October 2020, a matter of weeks ago?
Because we undertook a series of tests, including an 8414, which they take time to arrange and do. We had to investigate it, and then we got the reports back, which we could use to contact fire engineers, which would be useful for them, I think, in around February of 2020.
And we're going to come back to what happens in 2020 just shortly. I just want to ask you about how you first became aware of the fact that the 2005 test used a different K15 product from the product sold to the public from 2006. Can we look at your third witness statement, please, which is the 18th of September 2020, this year, at page 52, and look at paragraph 7.2. And here we have the question, how did this information come to your knowledge? And your answer is, in 2016, Gwyn Davis, Director of Processing, flagged the issue to me as part of our discussions around trying to replicate the 2005 BS8414 test for the testing of K115, as explained in paragraph 7.9 below. I was not concerned. I'll read it all to you. I was not concerned about the issue at this time and did not investigate it further, given that Insulation UK had been relying on the test for years, and I was not aware of any indication that the change had any impact on the product's fire performance. The issue was then drawn to my attention in 2018 by Insulation UK's solicitors, who have been advising Insulation UK in relation to the Grenfell Tower Inquiry. Now, just looking at the first part of that sentence, what exactly did Gwyn Davis flag to you at the time?
So we were doing a second iteration of the low lambda development of the product, which is phrased there as K115. And we'd asked the BRE how we could assess the performance of K115 against all the other tests evidence that we got in the armoury at the time, and they'd suggested that the 2005 test would be a good one to compare to. And so we'd done that. We'd built a system as close as we could with the materials that were now currently available. And the K115 didn't get the same result. So I inquired to Gwyn as could there be any difference between the products that are missing on. It's mostly, I think, system differences and And that was where Gwyn then came back and said, well, in 2005 that could well have been old technology, but you wouldn't be seeing a difference in fire performance. It was just a different process.
Right. And that was the first time, was it, that you'd heard reference to old technology?
Oh, no, old technology was a phrase used in the business commonly, I would say.
I see. Was it the first? This was therefore the first time that you'd found out that K15 was a old technology. Is that right?
The whole phenolic range changed from, I believe, from old tech to new tech.
Right. So you discovered, I think, that the 2005 that there had been a full scale fire test in 2005. I think you told us earlier in November 2014 when you took over your marketing role.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So you knew there'd been a full scale test at that point. Given that you knew that, as you've just told us, the whole phenolic range changed from old tech to new tech, did it not occur to you at that stage, November 14, that in fact the K15 being sold was new tech, not old tech?
I would have assumed it was new tech, yes, because it was
right.
It was current production.
Right. And given that it was common knowledge that there'd been this change, was it common knowledge that the change had happened in 2006?
No.
What was the date?
I didn't have a date in mind. It had happened, years ago.
It had happened years ago. So given that it had happened years ago, you must have realised at some point when you realised that the test had been done in 2005, that the test had been done on old tech. Or did you think then that the test had been done on new tech?
It could have been done on new tech. I didn't know.
Did you not explore that?
No, the date. No, not until we were doing this retesting.
Right. Now, you were asked, I think, by the inquiry about the source of the information that you set out here, and you answered that in your third witness statement in September this year, at page 53. At the next page, and I've misled you by that question, I'm afraid. In fact, you elaborate on what you've said rather than answering a further question. And what you say here is this information. Well, the question is, sorry, can we go back? It's page 53. You say, that's it. This information is not contained in specific documents. See my answer to question B above. The information came to my attention as part of the process of the document review and disclosure exercise undertaken to assist the Grenfell Tower Inquiry. See also the spreadsheet prepared to assist the inquiry, which sets out all of the changes made in the production of K15, which confirms this change at row 7. And you say the same thing at paragraph 10.30 of your second witness statement. So I just want you to be clear, if you can, Mr. Pargeter, with me. Did your awareness about the 2005 test using old technology, K15, come about as a result of it coming to your attention as part of the process of the document review and disclosure exercise for the inquiry, as you say in paragraph 7.3?
No, I think the fact that it was old technology was probably when the discussion I had with Gwyn Davies in 2016.
Right. Well, what was it that came to your attention as part of the process of the document review?
Oh, just exactly when the change occurred.
Right.
So I think it was September 2006, I think is the date that it's recorded as changing from old tech to new tech.
Right, I see. So just to unpick this a little bit, you learnt about the fact that K15 tested was different from Mr. Davies in 2016, but you only found out about the date of the change as a result of reviewing documents to assist this inquiry. Have I got that right?
That's correct, yeah.
I follow. Now, you say in this sentence, this information is not contained in specific documents. So see my answer to question B above. The information came to my attention as part of the process of the document review and disclosure exercise undertaken to assist the Grenfell inquiry. What documents exactly do you recall demonstrated to you that the change from old to new technology occurred in 2006?
So I didn't do the review itself in terms of the detail. That was done by Gwyn and his team. And so it would have been his research into, I'd imagine, old Tech Lam meeting minutes, which then compiled into that Kingspan document we've attached there.
Right. But you say in this sentence, this information is not contained in specific documents. The information came to my attention as part of the process of the document review and disclosure exercise. If the information isn't contained in specific documents, how could it come to your attention as part of the document review process and disclosure exercise undertaken to assist the inquiry?
Well, I think the document review is just a phrase, and it was just the investigations that were done with what evidence we could find back in that historical period.
Well, was it documents or wasn't it documents?
There must have been some documents which linked to this change, but it was just compiled and collated into this one.
When you spoke to Mr. Davis about this, when he flagged the issue to you in 2016, did he show you any documents or invite you to look yourself at any documents?
No.
Did you ask for any?
No.
Did it not shock you or surprise you to learn that the Kingspan K15 that was being sold by Kingspan at that point was not the same as a bit that had been tested, or may not have been the same as tested in 2005?
It didn't know, because products progress and change through their history. So I would have just expected that change had been controlled, and through that period of time, I wouldn't have looked back any further.
Well, that great respect doesn't make a lot of sense. Did you ask him whether there'd been a recent test, so that people buying K15 and putting it on their buildings were doing so on the basis of an 8414 test of what was going onto the building?
Well, in 2016, there'd been several recent tests by then anyway, so I knew the current products had been tested to 8414 in different system tests.
No, it's not quite an answer to my question, you see. What you're told by Mr. Davis is that what's being sold, and I'm summarising it, and tell me if this is an inaccurate summary, that what is being sold by Kingspan at that time, 2016, was not what had been tested under the 2005 8414 test. So did it not surprise you to learn that the product being bought by people was not the same product as had undergone a fire safety test 11 years previous?
No, I don't think it did.
Why is that?
Because there was an understanding that there wasn't a difference in the product, although it was a different technology, it was a different processing methodology. The product itself, essentially, is the same product.
Well, we've been around this a number of times, but when you first heard about it, was it Mr. Davis who said to you, well, there's been this change, but don't worry about it? Or did you come to the conclusion that you really shouldn't worry about it or do anything about it after further discussions and investigation?
I think after my discussions with Gwyn, I thought I don't need to do anything further with that. Right.
So does it come to this? I'm just trying to piece this conversation together in my head, as it were, in real time. He tells you that that what's being sold is different. At that moment, did it not occur to you that was something irregular or surprising? Before we come on to the explanation, was the news not a shock to you?
I don't think it was. I don't recall exactly, but I don't think it was.
And then how did the conversation go after that?
It was just about what was the difference, and he explained that it was a different process, and we can process it faster. And I was concerned about then how do we move the K115 project forward? Is there a problem now with the K115 material that we're looking at? Is that not performing in the same manner as the current production?
Gwyn Davis, is he a fire engineer?
No.
Does he have any fire safety qualifications?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. Did you have a discussion about what the fire safety implications of the change in process might be?
Well, only that the product performance that in the sort of small scale testing that we would do was a Euroclass C then, and it's a Euroclass C now. So in that respect, the chemistry tells them that there's not a significant difference, and then that Euroclass tells them there's not a significant difference.
Now, let's just examine that a bit further. Go back a page, please, in this third witness statement, paragraph 7.2. You say there, and this is where we see the discussion you're referring to with Gwyn Davis in 2016, and in the last, the first sentence, you say, in 2016, Gwyn Davis, Director of Processing, flagged the issue to me as part of our discussions around trying to replicate the 2005 BS 8414 test for the testing of K115, as explained, and I've read this to you before. You say, I was not concerned about the issue at this time. I did not investigate it further, given that Insulation UK had been relying on the test for years, and I was not aware of any indication that the change had any impact on the product's fire performance. And then you go on to say that the issue was then drawn again to your attention in 2018. Now, looking at your reasons there, you cite the fact, first, that the 2005 test had been relied on by Kingspan for years. Was that not, in fact, all the more reason to do something urgently about what you had just learnt from Mr. Davis? Namely, actually, quickly, to get to the bottom.
No, I think if he'd have indicated to me that there was a big difference in fire performance, let's say, it used to be an E on the Euroclass or a B, and now we're a C, then that may have caused more of a question for me to investigate.
But you also cite the fact that you were not aware of any indication that the change had any impact on the product's fire performance. But you don't say here that you actually positively investigated that question. Do you?
Well, I mean, positively investigated it to the point of having the discussion with Gwyn. No, I didn't go beyond that.
But you don't say here that I was not aware of any indication that the change had any impact because of what Gwyn Davis told me, do you?
No.
You don't refer to a discussion with Gwyn Davis about the technical fire safety implications of the change in the manufacturing process here in your statement, do you?
No.
Why is that?
But I think because I'm just really answering the question there, how did this information come to your knowledge? And that is how the information came to my knowledge.
Now, you had been head of technical as well as marketing since May 2015, so some 18 months or so, perhaps a little less. Did you not even think, as head of technical, to instigate a technical investigation into the actual changes in technology or process that had occurred some years, many years before, in order to decide what to do next?
No, I didn't.
Why is that?
Because I was just moving forward with the testing of the current product and of any new replacement lower lambda version. I didn't think to look back.
You didn't think to look back. For someone with great respect, with a first-class science degree in design and innovation, surely the fact that a different version of the phenolic foam had been used raised questions in your mind about the potential differences in fire performance.
And those questions were allied with the discussions with Gwyn, and I didn't take it any further.
Would you agree that any of a number of things could affect fire performance, such as changes to chemical composition, changes to the facer thickness, changes to the perforations, whether there were any, or use of adhesives, things like that? Any of those could affect fire performance, couldn't they?
They could, and most of those would be affected small-scale fire performance, if you like, rather than the large scale.
Did you investigate whether any of those particular differences between old and new technology existed?
No, I didn't.
Why is that?
It didn't occur to me.
Now, as I say, you were head of technical. Did you report what Gwyn Davis had told you about the change in technology and the fact that K15 may have been the old technology to anybody else? Did you discuss it? Did you seek a discussion with anybody on the main board?
No, I don't think I did.
What was it that changed between the discovery in 2016, as you've discussed, from Mr. Davis, and the 23rd of October 2020, when you wrote to various fire engineers, including the BRE, and to the inquiry, to acknowledge that the test relied on in 2005 was not in fact carried out on the K15, which had been sold since 2006? What had changed?
I think we were looking at it under a much more different light, obviously, much more focus on it. And I think the opinion then was it would be prudent to withdraw it at this stage.
Well, okay. You say looking at it under a much different light. What made the light different?
Obviously, under the deep investigation we'd done as part of the inquiry, we looked at a lot of different issues, and that was one that we thought was probably should have been dealt with at the time differently and shouldn't have been relied on going forward. But there's no thought that the difference in fire performance between the two technologies.
So the difference between 2016 and 2020, between your 2016 conversation with Mr. Davis and the withdrawal of the tests in October this year, the only difference was the degree of scrutiny being applied to the question by the inquiry.
I think potentially, yes.
We say potentially. What
Yes.
else is there?
Well, no, right, yeah, that's correct.
You mean actually?
Yes.
Yes. And that there was no technical discovery or anything else that led you to think that any assumptions that you'd made were wrong?
No, there's no technical
No.
discovery.
Thank you. Now, just going back to this discovery about old tech and new tech, is it the case that until the discussion that you'd had in 2016, you'd never seen any reference to Kesterend technology or new technology, K15, within the business?
Like I said, it was common knowledge of the change in technology, and Kesterend was a phrase used. Wouldn't have understood what that meant up until we started to do the work for the inquiry. So it was a common knowledge.
And when you became head of technical in 2015, May 15, did you never take it upon yourself to study or at least look over the large-scale fire testing that had been conducted by Kingspan on K15?
No, not into detail, no.
Were you not told about the issues with fire performance with new technology K15 that had occurred in 2007 or 2008?
At some point I was made aware of, I think the SOTEC testing was something that was mentioned. I think Ivor may have mentioned that with aluminium systems.
Yes.
I knew there was some system testing.
When did you come across
It's
that?
historical. I think it probably would have been just a few months after taking over the role.
Right. I'm sorry, I interrupted your answer with my next question. Did you want to finish off your answer about the aluminium systems?
No, I'd finished.
All right. Did you not come across reports in relation to the increased heat output or quicker times to ignition and continued burning that occurred during tests such as the SOTEC that you referred to?
No, I didn't.
And you say that it would have been a few months after taking over the role that you discovered that K15 burnt in the way that it did in relation to the SOTEC's test. Is that right?
No, I discovered that there'd been system tests done with SOTEC that hadn't passed.
That hadn't passed?
Yes.
And how did you discover that?
I imagine, can't remember exactly, would have been discussions with Ivor and potentially with Tony as well. But
Right. would either have told you, do you remember being told that the result of the SOTEC result was not just a fail, but a spectacular fail?
No.
Did you not ever use the expression raging inferno to you?
No.
When you became product development manager in 2013, or perhaps early 14, late 13, early 14, as we discussed, and were given the job of developing the new lower lambda K15, or K115, as I think it's been named, didn't you sit down with Ivor Meredith and go through the fire testing that had been undertaken on K15?
No, I didn't.
What about with Tony Millichap?
No.
How would you be able to develop or further the development of K115 without doing that?
Because at the time when I took over, I don't think I would have even understood what an 8414 test was. So I just knew there were a series of fire tests required to introduce a new product against the product standard, for one, and they would have been small-scale fire tests as well as a large-scale fire test if you wanted to use it above 18 metres, but I wouldn't have understood exactly what it was. But like I say, I didn't need to as product development manager. It was just that was part of the requirement of each of the departments to achieve the testing to be done. And that testing had already been done, actually, by the time I took over that project. At the large scale was, and then they were continuing with the production trials, and then the testing that's required as part of the product standard, which would be your SBI, your single bearing item.
Is it really right that when you took over as product manager, product development manager in late 13, early 14, the K115 large-scale test had been done? Is that right?
Well, there's two lower lambda developments. There's one which was just called lower lambda, so it was K15 LL, if you like, as a terminology, and that was the earlier development which we're talking about now. The K115 was slightly later, it was in 2016.
Right.
But it was based on the same premise. It was still based on using a solstice blown system to get our lower lambda version. So we'd stopped the project back in 2014-15 and restarted it again on K15 in 2016.
And when you came into the project, you were looking at the lower lambda as opposed to the K115. Is that what you were?
Yes.
I see. But wouldn't it have been required reading in order to develop the lower lambda project further, to look back and see what the K15 tests were?
Not for me, no, I didn't think.
Right, not for you. Or what about to get a brief on them so that you could understand what the previous test was and what the lower lambda product being developed would have to go through?
Sorry, say that again, sorry?
Yes, but let me try it a different way. What test would be applied to the lower lambda product to make it safe for use above 18 metres?
Yeah, so as I understand, it would be the BS8414 test.
It would be a BS8414 test, yes. And did you not want to know how BS8414 had, how K15 rather, had fared in any previous 8414 test, so that would inform your knowledge about how lower lambda might fare, or what you had to do in order to set up such a test?
No, like I said, that the test for the low lambda one had already been done. So for me, it was a number rather than I'd no concept of the size of the test or what was involved in it. It was a number, and that test had already been carried out. Right. So it was almost a tick in the box for the lower lambda development.
And when that discussion occurred about the lower lambda test, but was there any mention at that stage about old and new technology K15?
Not that I recall.
Because that would have been long before 2016, wouldn't it?
That would have been, 2014.
Yes.
Time.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about the cladding used in the 2005 test. Now, can we start by going to your first statement, please, at page 12? And I'd like to go in that to paragraph 4.13a. And I've read this to you before. And you refer there to a UAC-manufactured cement particle board rain screen fixed to an aluminium railing system. You see that? Now, in your second statement, let's just look at that. page 100, you say at paragraph 10.55, the top of the page, although I was not involved in the 2005 BS8414 test, I did become aware during the development testing of K115, a second project looking to improve thermal performance of the product, that the cladding in the test report may not have been correctly reported. And then you go on, if you look a little bit lower down that page, to say this: the test report for the 2005 BS8414 test refers to a 6mm UAC cement particle board being used as the external cladding element of the system tested. This would be unusual and would not be representative of an external cladding element because such material is not designed for an external application and may be subject to degradation upon weathering. However, having investigated the issue further, Kingspan is of the belief that the test report incorrectly references the type of cladding used, and that the cladding actually used in the external cladding system tested in 2005 was a fibre cement board, non-combustible, as opposed to cement particle board, which is generally rated as Euroclass B, which would be more representative of an external cladding system used in practice at that time. But I think it likely that the fibre cement board was chosen to simply replicate a non-combustible facade element as representative of the cladding used at the time. Now, I've read all that out to you so that everyone can see what you say. That statement there led to some questions from the inquiry, as a result of which you produced your third statement, or part of it. And can we go to page 54 in that document? Paragraph 7.10, at the bottom of page 54. And you're asked the question, on what do you base your view that a fibre cement board would be more representative of an external cladding system used in practice at the time? And your answer at 7.10 is this: cement particle board is not typically a product that is used in external range screen facade systems, whereas fibre cement board is. Adrian Pargeter also undertook a desktop analysis of cladding products, and this is the basis of my understanding. Now, cement particle board is a building board, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
And if we go over page 54 to page 55, at paragraph 7.12, we can see what you say about your investigations. You say that Adam Heath reviewed the delivery notes to confirm what products had been delivered to Insulation UK for the 2005 BS8414 test. And then you go on to say, in the last part of that paragraph, I believe that Adrian Pargeter also carried out a desktop analysis which identified that fibre cement board was more representative of products used in external cladding systems. I do not recall his findings being recorded in writing. Now, I've led you all through that. How did Adrian Pargeter impart the knowledge of this desktop analysis to you?
Just in discussions.
Right. So no writing, no document, no email, no report?
I don't recall any, no.
Right. When did he tell you that?
Oh, it would have been at the time we were looking at that test again in 2016, because we were looking to replicate the test for the K115 project, so we wanted to see if we could get exactly the same or as close to the original items tested.
When you say he carried out a desktop analysis, do you mean that he didn't write anything down, but he did it in his head?
No, he searched the internet to see what was currently available in terms of product descriptions, and because I don't think, I certainly wasn't aware of what the difference between a cement particle board and a fibre cement board was.
Right.
And so, and I don't think Adrian did either, so Adrian said he'd have a look and came back and said, yeah, it looks like a cement particle board is more like something we put on the inside of the system, and a fibre cement board is more likely to be used on the outside.
Oh, I see. So when you refer to a desktop analysis, you're not actually referring to a written analysis?
No, a review.
As opposed to a scamper through the internet to see what's out there?
A review.
I see. And did you make any notes of the so-called analysis that he'd undertaken and the products to which it related?
Not that I recall.
Is Adrian, I keep calling him Adam, we do have other Adams, is Adrian Pargeter a fire engineer?
No, he's not.
So all he did was just look in the internet and see what people used as cladding?
Yeah, what the suppliers were putting forward as cement board cladding products.
And that would have been in when? 2016,
Yes.
you say?
Yeah.
But that wouldn't have been a retrospective analysis of the market as it stood in 2005, would it?
No, it was what was available at that time.
No. So when you refer to the desktop analysis, which identified that fibre cement board is more representative of products using external cladding systems, that's the more representative in 2016, but not 2005.
Correct.
Can we look at the statement of Adam Heath? This is at KIN 408834. He's the individual that you refer to as having written to UAC to ask them if they manufactured cement particle board in the paragraph we've just looked at. And if we go to page 96 in his statement to the inquiry, paragraph 11.53, he says in the penultimate sentence of that paragraph, I'm afraid it's rather a long chunk of text, it's third line from the bottom, he says, based on this understanding that the 2005 BS8414 test used fibre cement boards, my view is that these boards were used as the cladding element of the tested system. I do not believe, he says, I do not believe that these boards are intended for use as rain screen cladding, and I am not aware of any buildings on which these boards have been used for this purpose. I am aware that there are now fibre cement cladding materials available on the market for use as rain screen cladding. Now, from that it appears that Adam Heath, at the time he wrote this statement, was of the opinion that fibre cement board was not a typical cladding material at the time of the test. Were you not aware also of his view when you signed your second and third witness statements?
That at the time it wasn't, in 2005. I probably would have thought it had never been.
Well, Adam Heath is saying that he was of the view that fibre cement board was not a typical cladding material at the time of the test. Were you not aware that that was his view when you made your second or third witness statements?
No, I probably would have shared that view.
Right. So what was the point, then, of referring to the opinion, your opinion, that fibre, it would have been a fibre cement board because that was more representative, when in fact, at the time of the test, Adam Heath was thinking the exact opposite?
I'm a bit confused by the question. Fibre cement is a board that is typically used, yes, and was, at the time, fibre cement. Cement particle board wasn't at 2016, wasn't at 2005.
No, we may be at cross purposes. My question really is why you thought that it would have been more likely that the BS8414 test in 2005 used cement particle board as opposed, fibre particle board as opposed to cement particle board. And in fact, Adam Heath's view is that fibre cement particle board would not at that time have been representative.
I don't think that's correct. I don't think he has that belief. I think he believes that fibre cement is more likely to have been a cladding material at the time than a cement particle board.
Well, he says, I do not believe that these boards, that's fibre cement boards, are intended for use as rain screen cladding. And I'm not aware of any buildings on which these boards have been used for this purpose. Are you saying he's wrong about that?
I don't know what he means by that, and maybe I was under the impression that fibre cement boards were available at the time as used as external cladding, but not cement particle boards as an external cladding. That's my understanding.
We saw from your first witness statement from October 2018, which I showed to you, that when you described the 2005 test, the build-up of the cladding included UAC manufactured cement particle board rain screen. That's what you said at paragraph 4.13a.
Yes.
Are you saying that's wrong?
No, that's what's in the report.
Exactly.
So in the first witness statement, all I'm doing there is explaining what was in the report that people could see at the time. But in 2016, we came to the understanding that it was unlikely to be a cement particle board, more likely to be a fibre cement board.
Well, you don't say that in your first statement.
No.
Either by way of qualification or revelation, do you?
No, I don't.
Why is that?
Because, like I say, I'm just stating there what would have been available in the report for people to see at the time.
Right. But when we come to the evolution of this point, it looks like Adam Heath, who'd done some work on this, was of the view that fibre cement boards, as opposed to cement particle boards, were not intended for use as rain screen cladding. And he's not aware of any buildings on which those boards have been used for that purpose.
Well, fibre cement boards are used.
Nowadays, he says, there are now fibre cement cladding materials available. So my question is, when you signed your second and third witness statements, did you take into account Adam Heath's view that there are no buildings he's aware of on which fibre cement boards are used?
No, I wasn't aware that he had that view.
Right. Now, I think you say in your third statement, let's go to that, please, at page 53, that you became aware that the cladding material in the 2005 test was incorrectly reported, as you say, in August 2016. If we go to paragraph 7.6, you can see that that is what you say. See that?
Yes.
Now, given that you had been told this in 2016, August 2016, was that before or after the conversation with Gwyn Davis where he told you that the 2005 test used a different version of K15? Or was it part of the same conversation?
It was part of the same development, so it probably would have been before I would have understood that that building board was different, because I spoke to Gwyn Davis after the test of the K115 product, whereas we would have found this out before the test in order to design the test for the K115 product.
Just so I'm clear, are there two conversations with Gwyn Davis about the 2005
No, I didn't
test?
speak to Gwyn Davis about the building board.
You didn't?
No.
So how did you discover in August 2016 that the cladding material or product used in the 2005 test was not cement particle board as described in the test, but fibre cement board?
So that was the discussions with my team that were looking at doing the replica test for K115, which was earlier in 2016. So when they were looking to source the products that were used in the original test, we came across this anomaly that it was reported as a UAC cement particle board. So we contacted, I think Adam contacted UAC and said, we'd like to source some of this material. And they said, well, we don't do cement particle board. So and then that raised the question then, well, what was it?
Right. And you inferred, I think, or somebody inferred that it was fibre cement particle board.
If it was
fibre cement board, sorry.
If it was UAC supplied, it would have had to have been, we understood, a fibre cement board rather than a cement particle board.
Right. Now, I want to put to you what Ivor Meredith said about this. Can we go to day 75, page 67, please? At line 3, Ms. Grange is examining him, and she asks him this question. Now, staying on page 6, if we look at 2 below that, we get fixing details in bold, and we've got details of the cool therm again in the first line. Then if you look at the end of the second line, we can see it gives a description of the cladding that was used for this test. And you have 1200 millimetres times 900 millimetres times 6 millimetres thick cement particle boards manufactured by UAC were mechanically fixed at 600 millimetre centres to an aluminium railing system, which was also mechanically fixed to the blockwork substrate. Do you see that there? Yes. As far as you were aware, were those cement particle boards non-combustible? Answer, it was a non-combustible cement board, particle board manufactured by UAC Bahad. They were a Middle Eastern manufacturer, but yes, it was a non-combustible as far as I was aware. Is that description of the outer cladding system given there correct, that it had those dimensions, 6mm thick cement particle boards manufactured by UAC? Is that description accurate? Answer, that's definitely accurate. Do you have any reason, Mr. Pargeter, to suggest why Ivor Meredith would be wrong in his recollection, as that evidence suggests?
Other than the potential confusion between what is the difference between cement particle board, fibre cement board, I think you can see quite regular references to cement board. And so I suspect that the difference between the two wasn't really understood, and that he is just referencing it as a cement particle board. And that is his belief, but actually our belief is it was a fibre cement board, but manufactured by the same people.
You see, he was there at the time and did the test, and you weren't.
That's correct.
So my question is, why would he get that wrong and you be right, based only on inference?
Because we just did the research. We tried to find out exactly what was tested by looking at what records we got and what records the BRE had got. It didn't give us anything conclusive other than the fact that UAC didn't make a cement particle board. So it was either a different supplier, and it wasn't UAC, providing a fibre cement board, a cement particle board, sorry, or it was UAC providing a fibre cement board. And I think the other clue is that it's very regularly described as a non-combustible building board. Well, a cement particle board, as I understand it, is generally a B-rated product, so would be combustible or maybe an A, I'm not sure, a limited combustibility, whereas a fibre cement board is a non-combustible product. So certainly Ivor believed, in my view, that it was a non-combustible board that he was testing with. And if it was a cement particle board, that's probably unlikely.
And either way, we've got Ivor Meredith's recollection as the man there at the time of the test, as against your inference later. And I'm going to suggest to you that his recollection is more likely to be accurate than your 2016 inferences based on market research done only at that time.
Well, if UAC made a cement particle board, then there's a chance he'd be correct, but he was wrong on one of the counts.
And you might be wrong on one of those counts.
We might be.
Yeah. And now, can you go to your third statement, please, at page 54, and look at paragraph 7.8 there. You're asked the question, what action did you take, if any, when you came to understand that this may be the case? And that's fibre cement board. You say, the fact that the terminology in the report was incorrect did not concern me too much because, as far as I was aware at the time, based on client communications during my tenure as Head of Marketing and Technical Great Britain, we described the 2005 test, BS 8414 test, as having been undertaken with a non-combustible cladding. Now, what do you mean there by based on client communications during your tenure?
Always under the opinion, I don't think we ever described it otherwise, that system used was a non-combustible board on the outside, and so whether it was fibre cement or cement particle board was kind of terminology if the performance was always described as a non-combustible cladding.
No, I'll repeat the question. Perhaps you haven't made it clear. I'm asking you about what you mean by client communications. You refer.
Oh, yeah, I think anybody inquiring about the test or our description of that test to clients would have been a non-combustible building board or non-combustible cement.
I see. So are you saying here that customers were told by Kingspan during your tenure as Head of Marketing that the 2005 BS 8414 test had been undertaken with a non-combustible cladding, without being specific as to whether it was cement
that's
particle board or cement fibre board?
Yes.
Right. Now, let's just take it in stages. Would you first agree that best practice would require that the description of a tested system, tested under BS 8414, should at the very least identify precisely the components of the test?
Yes, I would agree.
And do that fully and accurately?
Yes.
Were you aware in 2015 that the BS 8414 test was a system test at the very least?
Yes.
Yeah. And were you also aware that any successful BS 8414 test could only ever relate to the specific build-up tested?
In 2015, yes, other than the desktop study or an assessment route, but yes, the test is on a very specific system.
Yes, I understand the qualification you make
Yes.
about the desktop study, and I'm going to assume, unless you tell me otherwise, that comes from BCA Technical Guidance Note 18,
Correct.
June 2014.
Yes.
But leaving that on one side, would you have been aware, were you aware at the time, that any error in the description of the precise components of the build-up of the full-scale system as tested, any error would be of fundamental importance, because otherwise, if a designer sought to replicate the system said to have been tested, they wouldn't be doing so?
Yes, I would agree with that.
And therefore, your statement about Kingspan recording the cladding or telling clients that the cladding system was simply non-combustible would go against the very nature of BS 8414, because you would need to be able to identify the precise system components so that they could be replicated by the customer. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So far from reassuring you, the fact that this generic term, non-combustible cladding, was ever used to describe an important component of the system, I would suggest to you must have been a matter of concern to you when you discovered it. No?
No, I just thought it was just confusing the differences between cement boards, and that it was always under the impression that it was non-combustible, and therefore any system relied on would need to have been a non-combustible cladding board as well.
But were you not? Did it not occur to you that you were leading customers to think that so long as they used any old non-combustible cladding, that would satisfy BR 135 and BS 8414?
I don't think we were, not in 2015, because I think we'd understood now that system is just one particular system, and they'd have to have a desktop study or an assessment done on it based on that data.
You say that may be the case in 2015, but did it not concern you that had been the case historically? That historically, customers have been told that the cladding was non-combustible without identifying precisely what it was?
No, it didn't.
Why is that?
Well, I think because it was very unlikely anything was ever built with a cement particle board. So it could have only really been used as part of an assessment, because they wouldn't have been using cement particle board. They may have been using an alternative non-combustible board to build their buildings with, but not a cement particle board.
But how could you have thought, even historically, that it was acceptable to put out a report or description of the BS 8414 test that only described the cladding as non-combustible?
No, the report does. The report says UAC cement particle board, but the description of the performance of that board has always been non-combustible.
Now, were you aware that the Building Research Establishment, the BRE, had specifically told Kingspan at a meeting in 2006, and I appreciate it was before your time, that the scope for the BS 8414 test in 2005 didn't cover non-combustible cladding as a generic expression and can only be relevant for particular boards used as outer cladding in the actual test itself?
I wasn't aware of that at the time, no.
You would agree, I think, that if a BS 8414 report simply said metal cladding, that would be useless to anybody wishing to replicate the build-up, wouldn't it?
To replicate it precisely, yes.
Well, to replicate it in such a way that the external wall construction they put on their building complied with the building regulations.
Correct, yes.
Yes. And I would suggest that Kingspan deliberately described the system tested as using non-combustible cladding so that they could say that the test applied to any non-combustible cladding system, as opposed only specifically to the boards, whether they were fibre or particle, used in the test.
I think historically that seems to be the evidence that we've seen, yes.
You accept that? And did that when you made that discovery, what did you do about it?
About the difference in the description of the board?
Yes, during your tenure as head of marketing and technical, as you say.
Other than to try to ensure that the repeat test was done on a fibre cement board, I didn't do anything further than that.
Why didn't you undertake an investigation immediately as to how it could come about that clients were being told that the cladding used was simply non-combustible, as opposed to directing clients precisely to what the test report said, namely it was cement particle board, or to tell the clients that in fact that the test report was wrong and it was fibre board? Why did you not do that?
Because, like I say, it was always inferred that it was a non-combustible board. It was never going to be a system that was going to be built precisely as a cement particle board. So I just took it that, as we'd always described it, as a non-combustible board. However they were using that report would still be fine.
Do you accept that Kingspan's product literature for K15 throughout the entire period from May 2007, before your time, to July 2016, well into your time, makes no reference at all to the specific material used as the outer cladding in the May 2005 test?
That's correct.
Yes. And again, do you accept that that was done deliberately by Kingspan in order to ensure that K15 could be more widely used than the ambit of the test prescribed by the build-up of the 2005 test itself?
I can say I think the evidence that's come out that was the intention of the 2005 test, was to try and get a baseline system tested, which from that then could develop assessments. And we've seen in Ivor's evidence that was the intention to do with the BRE, that they would give that assessment. So I think that was the view, yes.
Did you ever investigate, even after 2016, why Kingspan's product literature up to that time, in this respect, used this useless and misleading nomenclature for the cladding?
No, I didn't. I didn't think it.
And why is that?
Well, I didn't think it was useless, and I thought it was still useful to use in terms of a desktop study, for example.
But it wouldn't have been useful in a desktop study unless the person conducting the desktop knew exactly what the product was. Do you accept that?
But that's correct, yes.
Yeah. And is it right that, in fact, having discovered in August 2016 that UAC Berhad cement particle board, as you say, wasn't used in the 2005 test, did you actually then seek to verify the product that had actually been used?
I think we did with UAC. I can't remember now. I think Adam found a delivery note or something which might have indicated the product name, but I can't remember precisely. I might be wrong there.
Right. What did you do to satisfy yourselves that it actually was non-combustible?
I can't recall, and I think we did find out exactly what board it was, and that was not. But generally,
really,
fibre boards. I might be wrong, but generally fibre boards are non-combustible.
Right. I want to look now, and we'll start, Mr. Chairman. We're going to start this topic. We won't finish it before 1 o'clock, but I'm going to have a start, if I may.
All right.
I'm going to ask you now to help me with how the cladding is referred to in documents. Can we start with your second witness statement, please, at page 101? And go to the top of that page, please, at paragraph 10.59. And this is a reference to the BS 84144 test in 2005. Question is, did you believe that the test had been successful? If so, on what basis? And you say, when I took over as head of technical in May 2015, the 2005 BS 8414 test report was being relied on by the technical team and was included in K15's BBA certificate, LABC registered detail, in K15 project literature. I understood that the 2005 test had been successful on this basis. This understanding was further supported with the issue by the BRE of the BR135 classification report, report number P101812, 1000, in 2015, without any issues being raised. Now, it's right, isn't it, that the numerous BBA certificates for K15 that we've seen, and we can look at them in a moment, some of them, listed the specific build-up of the 2005 test, don't they?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
And if we go to one of those, which is the one for October 2015, BBA 6040, please. This is the BBA certificate for K15 issued on the 8th of October 2015. If you look at the bottom of the page, you see that there.
I do.
That's while you were head of technical and marketing, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And if we scroll down to page 5, please, and look at the heading Behaviour in Fire at the bottom of the page, we can see section 8.2 that the construction build-ups are listed there, and there are specific build-up from the 2005 test there are listed under the heading Construction 1. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And it goes over the page. And you can see that the first element there is the 60 millimetres K15 insulation board, and the second is 6 millimetres cement particle boards mechanically fixed at 600 millimetres centres to an aluminium railing system. So that's clearly the 2005 test as you've just accepted. If we go to KIN 6077, this is the LABC certificate for K15, issued in August 2013 and then issued again on the 24th of March 2016. And by this time, you are head of technical and marketing, aren't you? And if we go to page, that's right, isn't it?
So which date was that? March 2016?
Yes. Issue dated 24th March 2016. First issued 28th of August 2013.
Yes, correct.
So this is issued at a time when you are head of technical and marketing, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And if we go to page 6 of this document, we see there, under supporting documentation, that the third item down is the K15 product specification and classification report index. And if we want to see that document, that's at KIN 6075. If we have that blown up, we can see that that's a list of BS 8414 test build-ups involving K15. And in the first line, it's rather indistinct, I'm afraid, but you can see that and if you can't, I'll try my...
I can see it says cement particle board.
It says 6 millimetre thick UAC cement particle board. Yes, thank you. So the BBA certificate and the LABC certificate either state expressly or incorporate references to cement particle board. Now, if we go to KIN 6086, we can see this is Kingspan's Routes to Compliance Fire Safety Literature, first released in August 2015, which you, I think, signed off before it was finally signed off by Richard Bromwich and Richard Burnley. Correct. In that month, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And if we go in that document to page 6, on the left-hand side of that page, we can see large-scale test data. You see under performance-based route, and it says large-scale test data, Kingspan Cool Foam K15 rain screen board has been tested in differing thicknesses with a range of cladding materials to BS 8414 Part 1, 2002 and BS 8414 Part 2 2005, in accordance with the performance criteria set out in BR 135, refer to Appendix B for details of the build-ups that have been successfully tested. And we can go to Appendix B on page 17 of this document, and we can see there a heading, large-scale test data. You see that there, and there are 3 build-ups identified. And the first one on the left-hand side is the 8414-2002 test done in 2005. You see that?
Yes.
And it has a line there to the cladding in the image, and it says 6mm non-combustible cement board cladding, doesn't it?
It does.
And it refers also to the BRE 2005 report, which I think, as we've seen, also refers to the cement particle board. That's right, isn't it?
Correct.
So this document, dated 2015, wasn't intended to correct that description. It was, in a way, perpetuating it. Yes?
It was perpetuating the fact that it was a non-combustible cement board, yes.
Cement board cladding, yes.
Yes.
Doesn't say cementitious fibreboard, does it?
No, it doesn't.
No. And can you think of a reason why that description was used, non-combustible cement board cladding, if in fact cementitious fibreboard had been used?
I don't know whether that was just a lift from previous descriptions, and it probably also predates the knowledge that it was a fibre cement board.
And the desktop assessments done in 2014 and 15, which you listed in your statement, all refer to the May 2005 test, which refers to cement particle board, don't they?
Yes.
Yes. So can you confirm that all of the documents that we've looked at, the BBA certificate, the LABC certificate, the Routes to Compliance August 2015 Kingspan document, and all 6 desktops would have been incorrect in their description of the cladding referred to in the 2005 test, if in fact it had been fibreboard and not cementitious particle board?
Yes, I do.
And do you also accept that each of these documents that we've been examining is misleading because they conceal the fact that the K15 being sold after 2006 is not as tested in the tests referred to?
I don't think it's misleading, no.
You don't think it's misleading? Why is that?
Like I've explained, the performance of the board we expected to be was the same, under the impression it was the same. So, from my perspective, it wouldn't be misleading.
From your perspective, it wouldn't be misleading. Well, perhaps we can continue that debate after the lunch break, Mr. Chairman.
Is that a good point, Mr.
Yes.
Millett? I think it's time we all had a break for lunch. Mr. Pargeter, so we're going to stop now. We'll come back at 2:05, please. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence over the break.
Of course.
All right. We'd like to give the usher, please. Thank you. 2:05, please.